Hey, welcome. This is the awkward intro to my favorite games played, I guess top 10 list of 2020. Welcome to the video. God, this is awkward. Hey, I'm making a video here. For the longest of time, for years now, I've actually probably at least mentally had made like a list of my favorite games of the year, just kind of looking back, thinking about the games I played and stuff. And then I guess for a while there, I think, I don't double check me on this, but I actually probably put the list on Twitter for several years there. And then I think yesterday, last year, I made like a really shittily made like video that I like broke up on Twitter and then post the full thing on YouTube, just hastily to try to start like a more of a traditional video thing every year. This year I'm doing it slightly different. This is going to be a massively unedited, low key, low energy, perhaps, if you can tell by my voice. Just kind of maybe slightly more intimate sounding video of me just kind of recounting my top 10 favorite games of 2020, like I said, that I played. So yeah, I'm not going to be doing a lot of editing, and the video is not going to be flashy or anything. It's just mostly I just like doing stuff like this because, like I said, I like looking back at it, and I also like just the chronicling kind of nature of stuff like this. So my top 10 favorite games. A couple things before we get into the actual list here, and some honorable mentions because it's really hard to just narrow it down to 10. But it is what it is. So favorite games played of this year. It's every year. I always feel the need to explain this. It's games I played for like the first time in 2020. It's not games that came out in 2020 because I don't a lot of the time play like the top games that do come out the year they actually come out just because of time and shit. Like I gotta space that shit out. The other thing, so yeah, there's gonna be a few older games on this list. I will say though that there's a chance that I may be way more heavily towards games that came out this year. Maybe I give them a few like mental extra bonus points when I'm compiling the list. I should also say like it's really hard when I like sit down and actually start like writing not only all the games I did play this year that I want to consider, and then narrowing it down and finally making a 10 list, like a top 10 list. It's somewhat difficult for me. They're just games, but like it's a recorded thing, like it's a record. And for some reason, I think I take that shit seriously. For some reason, even though there's no real reason for me to. Like, what kind of life am I living? It's very bizarre. But yeah, I ponder, I move things, I have a list, I move things up, I move things down, I take things off the list. It's always a process. It's just a process. Also, I had to cut it off at some point. Like, I'm currently playing a couple games that I don't think would make the top 10, but at some point you just got to find, like, just cut the time off. So it's really just basically what I played this year. On the off chance that maybe I'm playing The Last Guardian, like right now as I'm recording this, I'm several hours into that or so. Probably wouldn't make the top 10. It's actually kind of frustrating to play. I think it has some good ideas, but I'm mostly just finding myself being frustrated with it. So I'm pretty comfortable in saying I don't think it makes the top 10. Maybe it makes the honorable mentions, but as of right now, I would say it probably doesn't even make that. So spoiler alert. And then another point of clarification, there's always, when I make these lists, there's always like a big name game or two or three or so every year that I just don't get to that year. That like I know that if I did play, it would be like right up my alley and it would probably make the top 10 list. And it's just like this thing where I'm like, oh, I'll probably get to it next year. Last year's list, there was a game that came out in 2019 called Dicey Dungeons, which I didn't get to play in 2019 because I wasn't really gaming on PC, and it's only a Steam release or so whatever. And I finally played it this year. So hint hint, maybe it gets on this list this year. But I knew at the time that like it was a game for me, and if I would have gotten to it, it probably would have made the top 10 list last year. This year, the game that I want to give that qualification to is Hades. I'm sure that if I actually got around to playing Hades, I would fucking love it. but I didn't play Hades this year. It's just one of those games at the time it came out and everything, and my time and just a lot of things like just I had to push out to next year. Hopefully I'll play Hades maybe in the first half or something. I don't know. Schedules suck. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think. I feel like before I sat down and turned on the microphone and everything, I thought there was going to be other qualifications and stuff. Oh, I guess other things, like if there were games that were mostly just like remasters, I usually will, unless there's a very specific case, we'll leave those off. This year specifically, there was the Shadow of the Colossus remaster that would have at least probably got honorable mention. But because it was mostly a remaster, I mean, I'm bringing it up now, so I guess it's kind of like an honorable mention, so I guess it sneaks in. Anyway, but yeah, that was a fun game, and I think the remaster of it was actually really nice on PS4. Another game, most specifically, is Catherine Full Body that I played this year. Still hella fun. I still really love Catherine back. You know, I loved it back when I played on the PS3. Probably my favorite game, one of my favorite games of that generation. Being able to play Catherine Full Body here on the PS4. I almost said PS5. I technically played it on the PS5 there at the end, but super fun. And still super great, and I think still really great characters, great story, interesting. I think the additions they made in the game, they made like a bunch of different like cutscenes and stuff that were super cool, and just cool to see, kind of fleshing out like the history of Vincent and Catherine with a K. I think the additional character Rin was super great. I think they were like such a great character, and somewhat spoiler alert, not really, but in my playthrough of the game, when Rin left the game, and by actions that Vincent had done through choices that I had made and stuff, when Rin exited the game, I was actually crushed. So I was like, man, if I actually feel crushed because of this reason or whatever, I was like, they did a great job of making me care for Rin. So there's that. So those two remasters, you would call them, probably not on this list. I should also say, let me make sure I'm looking over this list. Yeah, all these games on my top 10 and a lot of the honorable mentions, they're all archived. So I should also say from the top, like if you wanted to potentially see me play through any of these games or whatever, or catch certain moments or whatever, they're all on YouTube at this point. Same channel this video is on. I for some reason really enjoy like cataloging my streams and archives and everything. Like again, it goes back to that whole loving just the chronicling of stuff, because I'm weird apparently. And yeah, that's as much as like I said, it's not going to be highly edited, and I'm just going to be weirdly talking to a mic, but I just appreciate doing this. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I joked earlier before I sat down and started recording bit, and I'm doing this in like parts and stuff, but I was joking. I was like, watch this be like over an hour. I don't think that that's far from a possibility. I think I could talk about some of these games for quite some time, and I want to talk about some of the games, especially the ones that make the actual top 10, like just interesting aspect wise. So I'm going to, before we get into the top 10, like I said, honorable mentions, just shout out some of these games. First off, it wouldn't be Austin if I didn't talk about Kingdom Hearts. Two Kingdom Hearts things came out this year, which is crazy to think. I think this past year with everything that had happened, a lot of people have like a certain touch point. I don't even know if that's the right word to say, but certain touch point where they go, man, do you remember this certain event or something that happened at the beginning of 2020? And now we've had a crazy year, and can you still believe this thing happened in 2020? I think a lot of people, just from what I've seen on the internet, have something like that. For me, because I'm a fucking nerd, I'll always remember that towards the beginning of 2020 is when Kingdom Hearts Remind DLC came out for Kingdom Hearts 3. That was crazy to think that was January. It feels so fucking long ago. It's not. It was a great DLC. I don't feel comfortable putting it on top 10 list, and I don't think it was a good enough experience for me to even put it on the top 10. But shout out to that. It was just interesting, and I just wanted to start it off on the shout out list because, like I said, just that's weirdly, at least video game wise, one of the anchor points. I have a more like actual, like real life anchor point for like what happened before like pandemic and everything. Like I changed jobs. I technically, and I'd use like air quotes, got fired from the other place I was going, but I was already on my way out, and then got a new job right before the pandemic hit, which added to like the weirdness of this year. So, but yeah, Remind DLC, shout out there, had some cool things, super fun. I got really into like the super tough boss fights and everything. It was just fun streams and stuff. Speaking of Kingdom Hearts though, Melody of Memory came out just not too long ago, a month or two. I have no concept of time. It's a fine game. I had fun because it's targeted to me, Kingdom Hearts shit, and a music game. It doesn't make top 10. It's not that great. It's honestly not that great of a music and rhythm game, if I'm being 100% honest. But it's interesting at least, and that's, you know, usually enough for me to at least get a shout out. Next is Typewriter. Very bizarre game. I don't know when this came out, probably years ago. Very weird platformer. I just wanted to shout it out because it wasn't long. It was super short. It was interesting though, and it wasn't like this funnest of games, but it was a tight little platformer where you played, I think as just a period, like the actual like period, like a like typed period, and you would go through worlds and you would learn about typography, and it was so weird. But I remember playing it and just being fascinated that there was this platforming game that was like whole thing, like it had some, it wasn't difficult or anything, but it was a little platformer, and as you're platforming along you learn about typography through the ages, and it was actually super interesting. I learned a lot of stuff, and it was funny a lot of the time, and not like intentionally funny. It was trying to just teach you. I found it funny because I have a fucked up mind or something, where I'm like, I can't believe I'm playing this platformer where it's teaching me about typography. So there's that. Erica, an FMV game I wanted to shout out. It wasn't very good. I only played one playthrough of it. It was like an hour and a half, I think, maybe, or an hour. But I'm shouting out because I love FMV games. I want more companies to do quirky stuff like that. Maybe someday I'll revisit it and try to just play through it again. Just try to get a different ending or whatever. But I always just appreciate FMV, kitschy, like janky FMV like games, even if like gameplay there's not much there. If it's just like a story and some choices. So yeah. Abzu, kind of like along the same lines of, you know, your journeys and stuff. I finally got around to playing it. It was short, didn't overstay its welcome. It was nice and relaxing. It wasn't super great, but I liked it. It was nice. Journeying with Water has some really good music too. Danganronpa, another episode, Ultra Despair Girls. What a title for that game. It was super interesting. It doesn't make it the top 10. I love the series, but it's obviously not the standard Danganronpa game. More action-y. Actually, not really action. It's much more like a puzzle. It's like a first-person puzzle game that you're using different types of like shooting things for it. So it's mostly like a puzzle game. But the most interesting part to this game was the quote bad guys of that game. I don't want to spoil too much, but their characterization was really interesting, I thought. Even though they had at first I was into it and I was like, oh, it's gonna be the annoying kid trope, like gang of kids, and I was gonna get fucking annoyed. It was almost there, but no, they pulled it off really well. Parsnip, a little game I played on itch.io. Super bizarre, hour-long experience. I don't want to say too much about it. I recommend you play it. It's free on itch.io, maybe, I think. Or maybe I just got it included. No, I think it is free. I got the sequel to it in the racial equality bundle from way back when, earlier this year. But Parsnip is free on itch.io. I suggest you play it. I think it's super interesting. It's only like an hour long. I don't want to say too much about it, but I thought it was just a fun experience. Catherine Full Body, already mentioned. This is a funny shout out. Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm 1. I think that's what the title of the game is. I'm just slowly playing through that. I think it's just over the top, stupid and fun. As someone who's been so far removed from the Naruto series, it's just funny to like get like very. I've only played the first game so far. Hopefully, through next year I'll play more of the games and stuff, time permitting and everything. But it's just funny going through these games or game and just being like, oh, I vaguely remember this character or this thing happening. It's just stupid fun. Shovel Knight, King of Cards, probably would have, if I went past 10 games, probably would have gotten like 12th or 13th. Super fun. I think the Shovel Knight people, Yacht Club games, really, after Shovel Knight, which I really liked back in the day, the first DLC thing that they were going to come out with didn't feel great. And I think they, after each subsequent DLC pack thing, you could tell they were getting more and more comfortable with like changing up like movement modes of the different characters. And this one had like this wild card game aspect that you could really get into if you really wanted. I really enjoyed King of Cards. Like I said, I got to it. I think it came out last year, but I only got to it this year. So it was part of me replaying like the whole series this past year, which was super fun to do. But yeah, King of Cards, super fun. These last three are like the last three I knocked off the top 10, quality-wise probably. Miles Morales probably would have gotten 12th or 13th for me. Super cool, much more tighter than the Spider-Man PS4. Spider-Man PS4. So for that, I think it's technically a better game. But back when Spider-Man PS4 came out, I probably would have rated it high because it was slightly more unexpected, if that makes sense. This one, I kind of knew what to expect. It was still super fun. I think they took out a lot of the stupid shit. The story was all right, but I think because I was used to it, maybe the wrong term, but because it is kind of a known quantity, if that makes sense, I don't rate it as high, but I still really enjoyed it. It was like one of the first games I played on the PS5, so I don't know if that holds anything, but yeah, it's probably would have gotten like 12th or 13th this year. And then finally, 11th place. This would have totally been 11th place for sure, because it was the last one knocked out. It was tough to do, is What Remains of Edith Finch. A game that came out years and years ago, and I never got around to playing. And I love me a good walking simulator type game. Whenever I use that term, I don't mean it as like a pejorative or anything. I thought this one was super good. I remember it's not too long. I thought it was super interesting. I thought a lot of the visuals and the way I don't want to say too much, but the way they told everyone's story and took different routes to do it was super cool. Yeah, I really liked What Remains of Edith Finch. And I was crazy that it took me that long to actually get to, years after it came out. So that's all pretty much the shout outs. We'll get into the actual top 10 in, descending order now at this point. Okay, so number 10 here, I don't actually have too much to say, so maybe we won't hit the hour mark. Who knows? Only you know. The viewer, the listener will know by the time you can see this and just see the time marker and see if we actually hit the hour. But I wanted to give number 10 to Mediatonic's Fall Guys coming out this year. A game I definitely would not have gotten or played if I didn't get it with the PS Plus subscription, which I think ultimately proves to be a super smart and interesting move on their part. Probably blew up that game, even if the limelight it got kind of got overshadowed at some point by some other streamy bait games or whatever. I think Fall Guys is actually, for the time that I was playing it, was super fun. I was actually really into it for that month or so. Super nice idea at the tail end of this time where I think the gravy train of like new heavy quotes battle royale ideas was kind of leaving the station or whatever. I'm mixing metaphors here, but there was a time where a bunch of companies were releasing and trying to do their takes on battle royale type games and everything, and that concept just got really tired and everything. I think this is a great story for Mediatonic, a really small company, really small team there, where they had a really good idea. And yeah, it was super fun. Like I said, really into it for, at least for me, for like a month or so there. It's very interesting concept. Very, again, one of those simple to grasp. Then after a few rounds, you're like, oh, I feel like I know these are the right moves to do. Really early on, especially when I was playing it, sometimes there was a lot of janky things, which it's like one of those games where, interestingly enough, like the jank of it is somewhat incorporated into the game, so that it was like basically you couldn't master it just by being super good. Like there's going to be cases where you'd lose or something would happen to where you're just like striking that balance between jank where it's so much that you're just frustrated, to jank where it's like, oh, this is keeping that slight randomization factor into a game like this where it's just supposed to kind of be fun or whatever. I think was super interesting for me just looking at the game where it's like, all right, they're being smart about it. And I think when it, day or two at first, I remember all the network issues and stuff. I'm not talking about that kind of jank. I'm just talking about the in-game jank, clear distinction there. So like I said, I don't have too much to say. It was, like I said, fun for a month or there. I'm glad it was super smart that they did the PS Plus thing. I think got a lot of people on the boat. Obviously don't know how popular the game is as of right now. I haven't actually played it in quite some time, but I assume it's still probably pretty popular. The natural drop off is obviously going to be there when something gets that quickly, that big, that quickly kind of thing. But I'm sure they're still seeing some kind of success and probably wildly outperformed their expectations and stuff. So good for that team. Like I said, I thought it was good enough for me to put on the list, number 10 wise. I thought that was extremely fair. And like I said, I had a lot of fun when I did play it. So yeah, 10, Fall Guys, Mediatonic. Good shit. So number 9 here is going to be a game that came out, I believe, in 2019, towards the second half, I think, of 2019 maybe. And I only got to earlier this year, called A Short Hike. Out, I think it's PC and Switch, perhaps. I played it on PC. Wow, Short Hike. I didn't expect much when I did play it, but I highly recommend if you're like, man, I just want a small little couple hour experience or whatever, and I just want to relax and play a little game to get my mind off of whatever fucking shit I'm dealing with at the moment. I highly recommend A Short Hike. I believe maybe talking out of my ass here, but I believe just one person, one of those games, smaller games that are made by like one person. You're just like in awe that like one person could just make something like that. At least that's how I act when I hear about games made by one person. Yeah, A Short Hike. What a nice, neat little experience it was. I had heard about it, like I said, in 2019. Some people that I respect had brought it up as like a nice little game to play. And then I finally got around to playing it in 2020. A nice little experience. It's just a little, I don't even know what kind of game to call it. It's not like a platformer or anything. It's just a little, it is what the title is, a short little hike. You're a little penguin boy, and you're plopped on a mountain, and you're given not really, I mean, there's an overall, like, I hate to even say like quest, but an overall narrative like thing, like, oh, this is a thing. Again, I should have said this back during the intro. I'm going to try not to say any spoilers for any of these games, but if I do, I will clearly say it like right before I say it, which may not be the best system, but I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to spoil A Short Hike. There's no reason for me to. But you're on a mountain and you just meet a bunch of people. You can do certain things. There's a bunch of little like interesting little stories for all the different characters you meet and stuff. The end bit to the story is, I found, super interesting. And again, it's one of those games where it's like even the ending isn't really the point of the game. As cliche as that sounds, it's more of just like the experience type thing of taking the short hike. And then even when you kind of, quote, finish it, I remember spending time after it, like, I don't even give away anything, but just spending a little more time in the game after the ending part where I was just like, oh, this is actually super nice. And like I said, great artistic kind of skills here. I really like the art style in it. And just like I said, the best praise I could give it is if you're ever just like, you're like, I just want to play a nice little game for a couple hours and I don't want to think about some annoying thing. I highly recommend Short Hike. And I think number 9 on my list is a good and fair thing. Like I said, it's short. It's a nice little experience. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, Short Hike, number 9. Good stuff. All right, so number 8 on this list is the a little pack-in game that could Asterisk Playroom there for the PS5. If you were able to snag one of those systems, this game is so fucking charming. Like, it has no right to be as charming as it is for a little pack-in game that probably I don't know, upper Sony brass had no probable idea that it was probably going to be as well received as it was for a pack-in game that was basically designed to be a free little thing that just shows off the text of basically the controller, and then also to playfully and cartoonily and funnily, sure, yeah, show off the inner workings of a PlayStation 5 or whatever. God, it's just so fucking charming. Gameplay wise, like super responsive, super tight, like platforming, really fun and interesting and exciting, like level design, actually, I feel. And of course, then the best part of it is the references to not only Sony tech, but like Sony marketing throughout the years. Interestingly enough, like the most obvious things are like, oh, little, PlayStation characters and stuff, and references like that to a lot of first party owned Sony stuff, but also like third party things that are closely tied to PlayStation throughout the years and stuff. But so the characters references are super obvious, a lot of them. Some of them I totally speaking of, didn't even like, I would see it and I'd be puzzled. I'd be like, what the fuck is this? And then like I'd have to go back and like search online or something for what exactly it was referencing, which is interesting enough, seeing as I've been some of them were like extreme deep cuts, which is interesting because of how, I don't know, entrenched I've been in the Sony space since I was a little kid, whose first video game was technically Tomb Raider on the PS1. Funny enough, that's a funny story. But yeah, that game, like I said, tight platforming. The references, though, from the characters, that's the most obvious. Then to the devices and stuff that you'd collect along the way. Super brilliant, in my opinion, idea of having the collectibles in game and in that little gacha machine thing be like old consoles and everything, just so that from the super hardcore fan kind of nerd people to even like the passive like ones that are like, oh, I know what I know that PSP, when it shows a picture of like a PlayStation Vita, and they'll be like, look at that PSP. Oh, I remember the PSP because they were used to like fucking mod it back in the day or something. Any range from those would find collecting those things super interesting. But then, like I said, the subtle like marketing things. I won't go too much into it, and I don't want to spoil too much and stuff. But certain things you collect marketing wise, certain when you go into the collection room, which was, what was it? It was weirdly called Labo, PlayStation Labo. Yeah, that was weird. When you go into that room, and then there's like a sign that you knock, and you can knock and it like falls down and it reveals like what it used to be called or something. Like, I forget exactly what it was. What is it? Sony. It's like Sony. The old one was something, and now I think it's SIE, Sony Interactive Entertainment or something like that. Whatever the case is, to all the way to like the late game thing where you beat a level, and then in the bottom basement area of the main hub world, like slowly starts revealing the symbols to PlayStation, triangle, circle, square, cross, whatever. And then that slowly starts opening up, and you're like, throughout the whole game, you're completing the levels, and you're like, what the fuck's gonna reveal? And like I said, I'm not gonna say too much. I don't want to spoil that part necessarily, but again, like the whole marketing thing to that, like that's such a deep cut that I thought was like super interesting. And again, for a pack-in game, that was actually super fun to play through, and it wasn't super long. It didn't need to be super long. I never played the PlayStation VR Astro's, what was it called? Rescue Bot, Astro something something, whatever. I never played that. I never had a VR. I've never played a VR game. Side note, whatever. Maybe someday. But I've never played that. So, but I'd always hear people bang on the drum of like how precious that game is and how underrated that game is, whatever. And I think going forward, I think team that made this was Team Asobi. If they are able, and I assume they would, like get the green light to just make a new something platformer in that franchise, I think, that they actually sell and stuff, I think they could do really well. It'll be missing most likely then the PlayStation history charm to it, but I think if they really hone that interesting platforming play, I think you could get something really good out of that. And yeah, so my only reference before this to the little Astrobot things was, I guess they were technically, when I bought the launch PS4 years ago now at this point, they were in the pack-in game for that, so that seems like something they have going forward. Kind of bums me out because this is a weird thought I had, but immediately after finishing it or playing it, I was like, man, for the PlayStation 6, whenever that comes out years and years from now, they can't really redo it, really. They can't easily enough. I'm sure they could do it technically, but they can't like ape the whole thing again, because then it loses a little bit of luster, a little bit of charm to it, maybe. I mean, they could technically still do it and change up some things, but like it would just be redoing it all if they wanted to include everything that they did before. So there was like a weird, like, it's such a weird thing for me to realize, but I was like, man, in years' time when they make the PlayStation 6, I would have to either just not do it or change it up significantly, or just kind of throw it in and just add a new kind of section to it possibly. But I thought it was interesting. And like I said, for a pack-in game to the PS5, to, I guess I'm looking at my list here, the highest thing on my list that was like one of the PlayStation 5 things, for that to be up there, like it's in my head better. I had more fun technically with it than like Miles Morales. I didn't play Bloodborne, but like Miles Morales and some other whatever things, like I think it's a really good job well done on their part. And like I said, immense amounts of charm. Further highlights a lot of the bungling PlayStation did with something like PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Like that game will serve as like, how did we do nostalgia wrong? That any nostalgia that Sony and PlayStation has, how hold that up as like, this is how you do it wrong, and how you just really fumble the bag, to Astro's little pack-in, Astro's Playroom here, to be like, this is how you do Sony nostalgia correctly. So yeah, I really loved it, and I was smiling the whole way through playing it. Like I said, it wasn't super long or anything, but just really, really enjoyed it, and didn't think I would like it and appreciate it as much as I ended up doing it. So yeah, that's number 8, Astro's Playroom. All right, what number are we on? 7. It's funny, this one, just on the previous one, I talked about how Astro's Playroom was my favorite thing on the PS5 at launch. This one, not technically a PS5 game in the original sense there, but I'll always tie it to the PS5 for what it is. Hint, hint, Bugsnax is my number 7. Nothing super technically impressive with this game, for sure. You do immediately, when you start playing it, see all the different influences other games and stuff have on the game as far as gameplay wise. Very much Pokemon collecting, very much Pokemon Snap, very much, I don't know, Viva Pinata-esque, maybe perhaps a bit. But super charming, super endearing. The reason it gets as high on my list is the characters, save for a few of them, are all really great. There's a couple that I'm like, ugh, but I guess they were like intentionally supposed to be obnoxious in a way. But I really love the characterization in this game. I really love some of the themes, like between and the interplay between the different characters and stuff. That was immediately apparent when I first started playing, and you start going to the part of the journal where you can read like not only the different snacks but the different characters and their little bio, and then it has a little thing where it's like loves this person, hates this person, or whatever the word they use there. And I thought at first, I was like, oh, that's, interesting enough. It's a very shorthand way of having it easily explained, like, oh, this person doesn't like this person or whatever. But you start to see, as you get these characters to the different characters into the main hub town, whatever, Snacksburg, I think it's called. And they interact with each other, and they have certain little interactions where it'll like pause your movement and stuff, and you see this like story develop between the different characters, and they have their different little motivations and stuff. Also, I loved especially like early game, like figuring out how to catch different snacks and stuff, the different traps and interactions you had to do to catch certain things. My biggest knock on the game itself is especially late game, and I don't know if it was just because the charm of catching snacks wore off, or if legitimately they started running out of interesting ways of catching snacks. But I actually got like frustrated towards the end, because I went for the platinum trophy. I went for catching every snack. I was legitimately annoyed late game, like the what seemed, at least in my perception wise, what seemed to be running out of ideas, interesting ideas and interactions between snacks to try to catch them. It really, in my opinion, devolved late game into here's a big aggressive fire snack, and here's a big aggressive cold snack, and you have to try to get them to run into each other to try to catch them. And that basically, in my opinion, like was like a lot of the late game snacks in there, and it just was not super fun. And it was super obnoxious to try to catch them, because not only is that just it got like boring to be like, all right, here's two aggressive snacks, and you got to make them run into each other by luring them, but also you're trying to catch them. And the moment either the fire thing or the ice thing touches you, you're out of commission. Fire for a few seconds, ice, you just have to rapidly press. But like, it's obnoxious to try to get this all these things working, and then also, like, if you touch something, or if they accidentally touch you, you might miss your opportunity or window of catching something because you're like frozen or on fire, and you're just it was legitimately like actually detracted from like the interest that I had of catching all the different snacks. Like, I was like so annoyed by that. I remember during my playthrough, and right before recording this section for Bug Snacks, I went back and watched to see my reaction to like late game catching them. And I was like, maybe just in the moment I was like annoyed, but no, I went back and listened to myself, and like I was so fucking annoyed by that late game thing. But I don't want most of my time speaking of this game to talk about that annoying frustration I had. I still think it was a legit, like, super interesting and fun game. And honestly, like, the themes of like accepting one another and accepting someone for their faults, and I think it's super charming to me. Was super charming to me. Super bizarre ending. I honestly, there was a point where pre-release of the game, I was like, oh, it's probably going to have some weird part to it or weird ending, and I would not have guessed exactly what. I'm not going to spoil Bug Snacks here, but I wouldn't have exactly guessed where it was going to go. There was probably maybe a late game where I was like, oh, something probably happened. But starting to play the game, I wouldn't have guessed this was direction. I knew it was going to go bizarre, but not like that direction of bizarre. But yeah, I think Young Horses, from going from Octodad back in the day, and the journey that game took from like a really early demo to it getting released on consoles and pretty much, I think at this point, released everywhere. Super interesting to see that they took the same kind of like path of like, hey, you show someone a quick video of it and you're like, look at this quirky little thing. And they went from that to, it seems like a natural evolution to more of a gamey game to Bugsnax. And that's like an interesting evolution, in my opinion. So I think that team at Young Horses did really well with that. And yeah, like I said, apart from the late game annoyance, where I guess technically I wouldn't have to have dealt with it if I wasn't catching everything. But even then, like, even when I wasn't catching them, I was starting late game to see, like, oh, they are just doing the whole fire and ice, run into each other kind of thing. Like, that was kind of disappointing to see late game. Like, I wish they either culled the number of snacks in the game or somehow had a few more ideas as far as, like, how to catch or interesting, maybe one or two more interesting traps or interactions that they could have with the world to kind of lessen the annoyance there, or like I said, just lowered the number. But it is what it is. I thought the game was still really good. Like I said, funny, interesting ending, I guess. Bizarre, and I expected at some point nothing less of the bizarre ending. But fun time overall with the game. Yeah, maybe the ending, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but maybe potentially opened up, I guess, the possibility of like a DLC thing or a sequel. But it's very much as easy as them just being able to be like, oh, it's just a whatever ending, and they just move on to the next project. I'd be curious if they take as far of a leap from Octodad to this and then their next game in several years or whatever, timeline wise. Whatever their next game is, I'd be actually super interested, especially if they flesh out even more and take as big of a jump. Super, super excited for what Young Horses does there. Okay, this next one. I assume, I don't know how long I'm going to devote, how much time I'm going to devote to this one. I assume I'm probably going to get as annoyed talking about it as I was annoyed when the game was released, and just as tired mentally. And I feel as if probably I'm going to be doing mental gymnastics, and it's just fucking, this is, I'm sitting down here and I'm just like, how long can I, so peek behind the curtain. Obviously I'm recording these parts at different times and whatever, and I got to this point today and it was to record this one, and I was sitting in the shower and I was like, how the fuck do I even start this one? So number 6 is Long Deep Breath, The Last of Us Part 2. Jesus, I feel like I'm still exhausted from the release of this game. The release of this game and the talk it got from everyone, it still like affects me, it feels like, to this day. So yes, number 6, The Last of Us Part 2. I wish I could just talk about whatever merits this game brings and the goods and the positives and the negatives, and then just wipe my hands and just fucking never think about this game again. Number 6, The Last of Us Part 2. It's impossible to do that, though, without bringing up my frustrations I have with the games industry, Naughty Dog as a developer. The whole system irks me. I say this all the time. Mentally, maybe I think it. I don't talk to people, so I don't say it that much. But I, at this point in my life, and for many years, I feel like I whatever. I love playing video games, whatever. But I find like the industry and its trends and everything a lot more interesting to like discuss and think about than I do actually sometimes playing video games. Maybe there's something wrong with me about that, but I just find it like interesting to think and talk about or whatever. But God, the months leading up to this game, the release of the game and then the talk after the release of the game, like, just drained me for some reason, for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I'll start off by saying this: the release of this game, Naughty Dog as a company, the problems that had light shone upon it, it gives me a good example of like being able to like point to and be like, this is the problem, one of the many problems with this fucking industry, video game industry. How do I boil this down? This is going to be a long discussion. It's frustrating to see that a game that's decent enough, that can be made and churned out by a company that technically is putting out really good, interesting, obviously people are going to disagree or whatever, but interesting games as far as technical wise, narrative wise, whatever the case is. Again, you may argue whatever. It's frustrating that can take place, but then behind it, the company behind it, the shit that comes out about the company, the frustrations of some of the workers, like, that's all there. And like, you can't just take a game and be like it is impossible for me when I started to put this game on here on the list, and this out of many of the other games on the list slid the most as I was like putting things, as I was like, there's no way I can just judge this game, what the game is like, how it plays or how I like the story or whatever. Like, impossible for me. It's frustrating. So what's my main thesis? It's frustrating that a game and games can be put out by this company, and it essentially provides, from what I see, a protective layer over the top people of this company, right? They can, as long as they're putting out interesting or technically impressive games, that it provides them a shield for a lot of reasons, from harsher criticisms from the much more, how do I even put it, much more mainstream voices out there. And it's hard. This part of what I was saying earlier on this, during the section, is that this game was tiring to talk through, and it was tiring to wade through all the different discourses and opinions that were going on, because fucking hell, dude, this game, a follow-up to a game that I really, really liked. I really loved the original Last of Us, and I have some really good memories, like, outside of the game relating to this game, like when I was playing it, and I won't get into all that, but because you had so many different pockets of people, and if you were ever to like enter into the discourse, like, you had to fucking put on a hazmat suit and just try your best, because it went from, there was a group of like bigots, right, that just would denounce the game and say it was a piece of shit because they're pieces of shit, right? And then there was the people that were like, oh, this game didn't need a sequel. And then there was the fierce defenders being like, hey, this game is a masterpiece. And then there was the legit people being like, I still have a lot of problems with Naughty Dog as a company and all the shit that's gone on there. And then there was like, oh, this game was pretty good. And it was just so many different pockets of people where, and if you attempted to, in good faith, like, bring like either criticisms or praise for the game, like, there was going to be people that, on all different sides of the circle. Circle doesn't have sides, does it? Sides of the circle. I'm just trying to make a metaphor for how many possible directions criticisms can come from. I don't even know if I'm making a ton of sense. I'm going to probably listen back to this and be like, what the fuck was I on? It's very difficult because this fucking game, I think the story was okay. I thought it was interesting. The game went on for far too long. The game was way too long, in my opinion. And it's weird to try to say that as a criticism because like games come obviously in so many different lengths and shit, and obviously I'm not gonna knock a game just because of its length, but in my opinion, the game went on too long. And I know that's a very simple criticism to give as well, but it just went on too long. But whatever. I thought the story was great. I really think some of the performances were great. I think some of the story bits were great. I think some of the story bits were not great. I still appreciated it. I still appreciate the original way more than I do Last of Us Part 2. There were still moments in this game that I thought were decent. There were such certain stretches where I was like, oh, this is really cool. There are certain stretches where like, this is wholly unnecessary. And like I said, overall, I feel like could have been cut back a lot, trimmed a lot of it, and still maybe had a better product. Now, there I am talking about the actual game. Also, I want to praise the game. Obviously, I'm not the first, I won't be the last, and I hope more bigger studios do stuff like this. Accessibility stuff, really great in the game. Whether it goes from things to make it so that it can actually be played by certain people to the fact where even your average video game player can just tune certain things to things that they like and makes the experience of playing the game better for them. That shit is really good. Now, talked about the game. Like I said, this is one of the biggest examples to me of what like the biggest problems of the quote industry is where you're a massive company that apparently has done a lot of shit and like it's then very difficult to criticize the company because you have people defending the products. They have people that assume that like the way they talk about the company and they're like, oh, well, they churn out really good games. How can we, maybe this is what's necessary. And then that like reinforces this thing because it's like, oh, as long as they're putting out good products then that some people like or sells really well or whatever, then maybe that's just how it has to be. And it's like that part is so frustrating. It's difficult. And like I said, this was now it looks like 10 minutes or so far of me just rambling and not really making a ton of sense because it's hard to make a lot of sense for me because I'm shitty at talking, but it's hard because it's frustrating. And my guess, because the world sucks, is the world sucks. Why am I getting so fucking macro about it? My guess is that nothing ultimately, especially on Naughty Dog's part, will change. Because, like I said, there's probably people at Naughty Dog that are like, hey, we made a thing that was commercially, critically, for the most part, received well. Just continue what we do. And then they turn around, they get a bunch of awards at, like, the Game Awards or whatever. And to the people that matter at Naughty Dog, that's what matters. To the people that matters at Naughty Dog, that's what matters. And why would you change what you're doing if you're getting what you want and you have a lot of loyal defenders, right? Like, and you have people protecting you from actual legit criticisms just because you put out a video game. Like, it's tough. Fucking number 6, Last of Us Part 2. I appreciated, I think, it was a steep order. I mean, because I liked the first one so much more, but maybe because that was a lot more unexpected. You know, there's always that barrier thing. I mentioned it earlier with, like, Miles Morales, where, like, I think I liked Spider-Man PS4 better just because I was expecting less, but when I was expecting more, then I just judge it against that. But man, fuck, dude. I'm like, it's frustrating. But yeah, man, the discussion around this game earlier this year, and this was like earlier pandemic times, slightly earlier pandemic times. So everyone was already on edge. And then, like I said, there's just so many different factions of people either going to bat for this game or going to bat for Naughty Dog, or the bigots that were going to tear it down when they have no idea what the fuck the actual game is about. And then there was the whole spoiler thing that happened about it, and it was constant, like a constant news cycle. it was just so tiring. It's just so tiring. Some of the performances were really great, technical wise. Some interesting things, some wholly unnecessary things. Again, wholly unnecessarily wrong. I'm just repeating myself. It's like I want this video to be like 2 hours or something. I don't. Like I said, I'm gonna be listening back to all this. I'm gonna be like, one, what the hell was I talking about? Two, I'm gonna be like, what my voice sucks. But yeah, this game, I think 6 is fair. I think it was an okay game. I'm not saying it would be higher on my list if Naughty Dog was a great sounding company. I'm definitely not saying that. I put it on my list at where I think it should be, as far as what I've enjoyed this year. But yeah, it did slide around a lot as I was compiling the list here. And yeah, like I said, I think one of the best examples of what's one of the many wrong things with the industry, capital T, capital I, is just point to Naughty Dog and be like, this is the most frustrating and things that's super wrong with how it works, how the machine works, you know? And it's hard for my pea brain and my shitty I don't know, mouth to exactly articulate how difficult it is for me to put it all together. So there we go. Almost 15 minutes of me talking about this wholly, slightly above average game. There you go. Okay. Starting at this list. Starting on this list. Starting with this number, and going up, I would say this is where like we get to the A-ranked games, in my opinion. These last 5 here are like just like chef's kiss, like great games, in my opinion. And I'm gonna not only potentially, no, I won't spoil these like next 2 because there's no real need to. But I'm gonna also attempt to try to sell you on when I discuss how good these games are. I alluded to this game way earlier in this video, and it's a game that if I had a good gaming PC back in the day, and back in the day I mean 2019, I would have gotten it at launch, and it wasn't until I got my newest PC here that I was like, felt comfortable getting it. It is number 5, Dicey Dungeons. Dicey Dungeons? Yes, it's plural. Dungeons. Dicey Dungeons. Released on it's a Steam, it's itch.io, it's, computer game. I think just recently released on the Switch as well. This game is fucking brilliant and like extremely my shit. Rogue like card based dice system is my best attempt at categorizing it. This game is so good on so many levels and for different reasons. First off, art direction and music is just on point. So yeah, but gameplay wise, this game and the biggest thing I want to compliment this game for is it does an excellent job of like its difficulty curve and like ramping up to what it's going to do, because really early on in this game, you are like, you're like, oh, this game is like really easy, and it's, I'm going to have a great time or an easy time just kind of blasting through this. And it is really easy at the beginning as it's starting to introduce you to these different characters and different systems and battle systems and its inner systems and everything. You're like, oh, how can they really do it? And then it gets really brilliant where like a few episodes into this thing, it gets like harder and harder at a really good like curve at like level. And you're like, it gets really smart too. The way like everything just interacts and everything. I've done a really bad job of already explaining what this is, but basically it's like you have several different characters with all their different rule sets and everything, and you're basically just, it's simplistic in its design of just like you understand everything really early on. It's then when it starts like rule sets and items start evolving and getting slightly more like, what's that phrase? It's like, oh, easy to learn, hard to master, whatever. It's kind of like some kind of system like that, but it's not like hard to master. It's just, it's in the game. It's easy to learn, and then they really just evolve and evolve and evolve everything. That's just really good. So yeah, again, I've done a terrible job of explaining what this game is, but basically, imagine like your kind of typical like roguelike deck kind of like building game almost, but then also incorporate random chance dice rolling into it. And you get like this combination where it's like you're constantly planning, thinking ahead, like especially later on episodes, you're constantly having to think ahead, constantly figuring out, how you're going to protect yourself from certain things. And I don't know, it's just so, the exterior is super charming. The music is really great. The art is really great. And then like you get into the actual like gameplay systems and you're like, like at least for me, maybe it's just me, but I just kept going like, this is really smart. There was like, I played the Halloween mod that was like officially done by them, that like the system, you start seeing like different ways that people can like really change up the system from its like core things, where like one of the episodes in the Halloween mod turned it into exactly like just a straight up like puzzle game using the same mechanics. It turned it into just a straight up puzzle game, and you're like, oh, this is so good, this is so smart. The music is really good. There are some tracks that are just so fucking good on it that you start listening and you start hearing like repeat every once in a while, and you're like, oh, this is really fucking brilliant. If I remember to in post right around here, I'm gonna just I'm just gonna take a snippet from one of my favorite tracks in the game and just like put it here, just so you can see like just how like fucking hype one of the like the battle tracks is. So I'll like put it there, here. Yeah, hopefully I actually remember to edit that in. There's a chance I don't, or I miss it somehow. Never rule that out. But yeah, super fun. If you get to a character and you're like, I just don't like this character, I'm going to move on. Like I said, they have a bunch of different characters to kind of like change up the way you're going to play, or how they're going to like make it so that you have to kind of get through certain levels. Another thing this game really brilliantly does is there's obviously the random chance with dice rolls. Some of the items you get throughout the place are like randomly generated, I believe. But the other smart thing it does is that sometimes a lot of the items you find in levels isn't randomized. And you start seeing that, especially if you have to like retry levels, especially later on ones that you keep losing, because then you start seeing the same things pop up and you're like, oh, I'm going to like earlier on try to have a build that more works in sync with this item or this card or whatever. So you start learning, like, if you do keep dying on harder levels, you start going like, okay, this game wants me to kind of go in this direction, or I'm going to try to build for this direction. And I think that's pretty smart because, like, obviously the dice rolling is random, but the items you can kind of like plan around, and so you're not like completely just hoping you get a completely good, like don't get your later rounds are more about how well are you at adapting, and they feel less like, hey, am I getting really good dice rolls, or am I just randomly getting extremely good luck in item generation or whatever. Like, it's very much like, no, can you realize that you're going to keep getting this item, and potentially this would be the key that you need to solve certain later difficulties. Like I said, if I would have played this game last year, probably would have been ranked really high. Glad to I got around to it playing this year. The game is super good. I'm still like slowly playing it at certain points because it is a pretty as far as you're willing to stick with it, it'll give you back. Like if you're willing to put more time, get past like the easier things where it's kind of like onboarding you. If you stick with the game, it's going to give you a lot more fun in advance. It gets really fucking difficult later levels, so you really have to be smart, unlike me. But yeah, it's a tight little package of a game for sure. So number 5, super deserving. Probably would have been higher last year for me for sure if I played it last year. This year I just played, like I said from earlier on in the video, like I played much more good games, I feel like, this year. So yeah, number 5, Dicey Dungeons. I highly recommend it. All right, this next one is going to be, I feel like, interesting to talk about and not annoying to talk about as the Last of Us one was. This one, because I got to it years after its release and after whatever discourse that I was not paying attention to when it probably got released. My number 4 for this year is Night in the Woods. I have no idea what actual, like, publicly, what, if people like this game even, because like I said, I obviously was not paying attention to it when it first came out. And it's not like I talked to people about this game since I beat it a few months back. But, and I think, well, I'll get to this later. But yeah, number 4, Night in the Woods for me. God, it really hit me. Its writing, which is the main standout to the game, to me, and obviously, in my opinion, was really good. And I think your mileage is going to vary based on how the way the characters speak to one another and how certain moods and feelings kind of hit you. Like, I feel like it's one of those games that could totally flop with a certain kind of person, and then like maybe possibly for me, it hits like exactly the right spot. And like there might not be like anything in between that, just because it is wholly based. And I think it's, if you appreciate the game, it's like wholly based on if certain interactions or whatever really reflect on certain moods that you may have as like a person or something, if any of that makes sense. But yeah, Night in the Woods, number 4. Like I said, I had been wanting to play it for a long time and never really got around to it. But finally I did this year, and I was super glad I did. I'm not going to bring them up too much, but there's certain other games too that reflect on this kind of mood I'm about to talk about, but like maybe it's just because I'm a big dum-dum or something, but a game that like kind of expertly reflects, or maybe not even expertly, but reflects the sadness about coming home or failing at something in your adult life. I think that's what it is. I think the thing that exactly hits me is a story about failing in life and then coming back to the people that you used to know, and they all know that you failed at something, and then you having to like reconcile that and move on, is like a thing that I think just in life and in media like weirdly hits me. I wonder what that says about me. But yeah, I think like coming to grips with something backfiring and failing is just a thing. I really trailed off here. I hope what I'm trying to say is making sense. This is what I get for doing too many of these in one sitting. But yeah, Night in the Woods. Okay, what am I trying to say? I think the writing was really well done. I think I have no idea what people's whose opinions I actually trust and respect. I have no idea what those are. I've really spoken to anyone since beating the game, which again was like months ago, because like I said, I beat it after any public discourse goes on of this game. So maybe I'm just dumb, and maybe this is just weirdly this stuff that I maybe I just like stupid stuff. But like I said, I think the writing was actually really well done because gameplay wise, there's not much there, right? As far as the game part of the video game, it's not substantive, but like it doesn't matter because I thought May as a character, certain aspects of May, like I said, personality wise, and like interactions with parents, and like I said, like coming back after you've failed something as an adult or as like a young adult, and then having to face those people having I'm not trying to say this is exactly a parallel to my life, but having to face those people that you almost potentially like cast off. Like if you get to a point in your life where you're like, oh, I'll never see these people again. I'll never have to deal with repercussions of cutting them out of my life. And then something goes wrong that you put quite a bit of stake into, and then having to come back and face those same people from your past. Like that weirdly hits me for whatever reason. And so, like I said, that's part of why I think this is like one of those your mileage may vary type games where like you can tell it was probably written by someone who had feelings like that, and it's going to hit people the most who've had feelings that are somewhat in line with that. And if you haven't, then it's going to fall flat. But to me, it massively hit. It struck my heart asunder, and yeah, made me feel sad. But like feeling sad is good sometimes. And then it had like, I mean, it had the ending was weird, not weird in like a bad way at all or in any stretch, but just like a very much like just an out there ending kind of thing. But aside from that, actual gameplay wise, it's basically the interactions that really did this game for me. Yeah, interactions between May and the parents, like obviously the two different parents. That's what you have, but the interactions with the mom on a daily basis, the interactions you'd have with her dad at the end of every day that you could have, and then between her and her friends, again, friends that you probably cast aside when you're like, I'm going to move on to bigger and better things, and then that doesn't pan out, and then having to like come back, and in your head you're probably like, oh, nothing's changed and I can just come back and slide right back into the relationship we used to have, and they're like, you fucking left and things changed. Like, ugh. Going back to your old town or seeing people from your past after you've probably changed as a person and they've probably changed as a person, and the place has changed as like a place, and you attempt so hard to try to just slide back in, disregarding those changes was like a big thing. That's like there, like acting as if both people hadn't changed when in fact it's very easy to see that both people have changed in that regard. Yeah, I don't know. I'm bad at talking about story and stuff and how it impacts me, clearly. That's why I don't do this that much. But yeah, Night in the Woods, number 4. Wish I would have played it years ago so that I had more and more, could see more and more of the discussion. Maybe, perhaps. But yeah, I really liked this game, and glad I actually did get to it at some point, because it was good. I really liked it, and there's potential that if anyone hears this and they're like, what the fuck, this game was trash, my guess is that it's one of those very zeros or ones type game where it's like either it really resonates with you or it massively doesn't, and it's very few people in between is my guess. And I think I happen to be maybe weirdly on the side that it resonates with. So yeah, Night in the Woods, number 4. good game. All right, these next three are that I just when I discuss them, it's very open to the possibility of light to heavy spoilers. It's just going to be impossible for me to talk about these three games without potentially doing, again, minor spoilers, and then as we get up the list, very heavy spoilers. My number one, I have to just talk about the ending and stuff, but number three, a game you've probably never heard about unless you were seeing my tweets about it back when I was playing it earlier this year. But like I said, man, what a fucking game. What a trip this game was. It is 428 Shibuya Scramble. Available on PlayStation consoles at this point. Available on Steam, I believe, from what I'm seeing here. I guess technically available on the Wii. I think it was Japanese. So this fucking game came out back, as I look here, and I knew at the time when I started playing it because I looked into it. It originally came out on the Wii, I think in Japan, 2008. Came westward much later, from what I understand. Like I said, game you've probably never heard about, possibly. But man, is it a trip. And honestly, I said this about Dicey Dungeons in a different way. The more time you put into this and the more you give it, the more it will give you in return. This game goes on forever. And not like Last of Us Part 2 in a bad way. And this game is much longer. It is, I forget exactly how much time I put into it. Probably close to get everything out of it. It's one of those games that, like, the more and more you squeeze to try to get out of it, the more and more it will give you if you want it. And it's very bizarre in that way. I'm going to try not to spoil too much about it, but it is very bizarre. Bizarre is like the best word to describe it, but also doesn't do it doesn't do its justice for what exactly it is. It is a visual novel in the strongest sense, where it's mostly just reading. It is almost all just reading, but it's story contained. It's basically an overarching story told from several different people's perspectives, intertwined expertly to present this story that is all kinds of weird, but charming and mysterious, and just I can't fucking count how many times I say weird or bizarre during this whole thing. But yeah, very it's very hard to talk about this game. Like I said, it's a visual novel, many different characters you'll fall in love with, some that are great, some that are like you'll love, some you'll hate intentionally. Starts in it's the way it starts this game. The way this game starts is very run of the mill. You're like, oh, it's just a little thing, and then it just evolves and evolves, and the plot thickens and thickens so well that you're just like constantly like, how does it keep going? How is there more layers to this thing? And then it just keeps going and keeps going. I'm not gonna spoil too many things about it. One, like late game stuff. This is like the most spoiler I might get about it. But late game stuff is that you unlock more characters and more perspectives. And at some point you get like an anime visual novel. So it's all real people. It's like real people acting in images and stills and videos. And then like late game you unlock more characters, and then there's like a whole nother like few hours of like this like anime ass looking visual novel thing, but it all makes sense in its own bizarre way. And then there's like there's so many side stories that you unlock and get through the game and do different things, and things that unlock. Like I said, the more time you want, the more you squeeze out of this game, the more it will give you if you want to go deep down the rabbit hole. And this is one of those games that I like highly recommend. If you are even slightly interested in like a visual novel type game that has like a big old mystery to it, and you're just willing to slowly like play for hours and hours and hours and hours, it will give you so much in return. I'm looking at it right now. Obviously, at the point that I'm recording this, You could, until January 5th, get it for 80% off on Steam right now. So it is $10 on Steam right now. So as long as there's no catastrophic things about this video, if you're listening to this when it first gets published, spend $10. Play it on Steam if you need to. Play it. It's so good. This definitely it's one of those games that, like, I only attempted to play it because I follow, like, a lot of people, like Wario64, and every time this game would go on sale, he would post, like, it's on sale, post a random screen from it that's he would design to, catch your eye, it's funny or whatever. But everyone in the comments, everyone who quote tweets that thing would be like, play this fucking game, it's so underappreciated, so underrated. It is so good. And, like, even the slight spoilers I gave it aren't going to make sense until you play it. But it's just expertly does the weaving, intertwining, like, character story thing in a fun, interesting way in the visual novel style. Super funny. Very good, funny writing, from, like, intentionally funny to unintentionally funny. Like, there's designed jokes in the writing and stuff. And then, like, it's funny that you'll be like, what is this fucking thing I'm playing? Like, constantly. In just the best way possible. Like I said, it's very hard to talk about because, like I said, it's hours and hours of a game. And I'm basically just saying, like, oh, it's a visual novel that you just got to give it a chance. You gotta close your eyes and trust in me that it's worth even $10 to play. But the story is so good that number 3, like I said, if these other two games, like, if I played this game back in, like, 2008, like, when it first technically came out, I would have been like, oh, this is the best fucking thing. But there's a couple games now above this year that I played that I like more. But this is so good. And the biggest, like, what the fuck game this is, like, I love that I can put this game on this list this high, and that I actually gave it a shot. I actually trusted random internet people to lead me the right direction. 'Cause yeah, it's good. It was a whole lot of fun. And like I said, every time it did a turn or something unlocked, just, if you constantly want to just, like, be like, what the fuck did I just play? What the fuck did I just read? What the fuck is happening? I can't believe this game is still going on. If you want, like, those emotions, along with the whole, like, oh, it's a story and a mystery, plot, unrolling, unfurling, whatever, like, this is that game. It's hard to talk about, though, because it is so much. It is so thick. It is so condensed, and there's so much to it. And it's weird. It is very weird. And I hate saying that. Keep saying weird or bizarre, because it's very easy to be like, oh, look at this wacky Japanese shit. How crazy this is. But, like, for real, that is what this game is. So yeah, super fun. I mean, I literally play everything through it. I squeeze everything the game had out of it. If it's something you're like, I don't want to play it, like I said, it's all on my channel. You could, I guess, in theory, watch my reactions with it to it all, everything, and it would be fine, I guess. But I would highly recommend you to play it. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's good. It is very good. Maybe I just like visual novels though more. If you're, like, not down to read, if you just don't like reading, then yeah, I guess you're not gonna enjoy it. But other than that, if you like to read, I highly recommend this game. 428 Shibuya Scramble, number 3 of my games played this year. All right, let's knock these last 2 out. And I say that knowing that these last 2 I might spend the most amount of time on. Who fucking knows? My number 2 game this year I played, again, a game that did not come out this year, for sure. A few years old at this point, I think. Danganronpa V3. Like I said, potentially, no, not even potentially. There's probably going to be massive spoiler talk about this game, so if you'd rather not hear that, X out now. This game, the series, Uh, After this game, when I finished this game, I was like, yep, Danganronpa as a series definitely cements itself as my number two favorite video game series in existence. This is one of those games that, like I said, I got to a little after it came out here in the West, even. And I really liked this game and series in general. I always say that the Danganronpa games, if they weren't in the genre that they are, if that makes sense, they would be a lot more popular. But because it is a visual novel-esque game, it's just the audience is never gonna, like, a huge audience is never gonna materialize. But Danganronpa V3 starts off, again, spoiler-wise, bumming me out, where I thought we were gonna, get the Kaede female protagonist, different kind of perspective, and that quickly they change that. They do that, narratively. I won't go into everything about it, but they change that. You think you're going to be one protagonist through the game. They change that after the first chapter or whatever. Disappointing, but also, like, I get it. Danganronpa V3, compared to the other Danganronpa games, is still the similar stuff. Intentionally, perhaps. But I feel like it is my favorite of the series. I haven't said much about the game because it's the same game, and that sounds like a negative. That sounds like I'm knocking on it, but no, it's more of the Danganronpa goodness. That if you're a fan of the previous games, you're definitely gonna like this one. But this seems to be it. Again, spoiler heavy perhaps, but this definitely seems like it was written to be like, this is the creators wanting to end the series, probably for a lot of reasons. I always go back to, I don't know the interview because I've read the interview a long time ago, probably even before I played the actual game, but I feel like there was an interview where the main writers and directors was talking about how much pressure they felt from this game's popularity and the series. I mean, previous to Danganronpa V3, there was Ultra Spare Girls, another episode, which was a complete departure, still similar storytelling, but game-wise was completely different. And I don't know how well that game did, but I imagine because it wasn't a core numbered game, probably didn't do as well. But starting from then, and then like the pressure they probably felt to make another game in the series and finish the series, probably it was like a direct product to this game, which I find interesting. There's themes and the meta-ness of the game. Like, it would be impossible to not read the ending to the game to be like a direct parallel that the creators of the game probably felt about the series and the pressure they felt to satisfy all of the annoying rabid fan base that this game has. Like, I hate knocking a game for its annoying fan base, but it's no mystery that, like, the Danganronpa diehard fans out there, the vocal ones at least, are just obnoxious as hell. Which is always a thing, because it always seems to... It's the shitty thing, because I just said it was like my second favorite game series, my first one being Kingdom Hearts, and me being always like, but I'm not like one of those annoying fans. Like, it's hard for me to even say that, because it's obviously a dumb thing to say. But, yeah, this game was really good, and it's the type of game that when it finished, when you come to the conclusion of Danganronpa V3, and it hits you with all this meta shit, and it hits you with this immediate impact that you're like, oh no, not only did I finish this game, this is pretty much it for the series. Now, I strongly think that if they really, really wanted to, they could smartly come back to it. I think I won't get too much into the weeds of it, but I do think there would be a way for them to revisit the series if they really, really wanted to. But for all intents and purposes, it seems like there was that moment when I played it and I was like, oh, I was saying earlier, the train I was on was, oh, I finished the game. Oh, I finished the series. Like, there's almost probably no real chance that this is going to continue after this. Like, this was very much written to be like, hey, this is us, us parting from the series. And, there's the read on it that, like, the meta-ness that I keep bringing up, where it says, like, hey, this in-game, the in-game audience for the Danganronpa series is the potential out-of-game actual audience for the game itself, and how much pressure the creators did on not only producing the game, making the game, shipping game, whatever, but also, like, continuing the series and satisfying everyone. Like, it's almost impossible to not read it as that. It's also the game that when I finished, not only was I like, oh, it's all ending, but also I was like, oh, there's going to be, as I do with, like, a lot of games, I'm going to go online, I'm going to see what people's opinions are on this, and I'm sure it's going to be divisive. And sure enough, if you dig down deep enough, you see a lot of people that are not too pleased about the ending and stuff. Some valid criticism for sure, that they didn't end the series well. Like, they almost took, like, a cheap backdoor out of the series, being like, oh, it was all really boiling it down to the easiest concept I can make to this, especially if you're not familiar with the series. But, like, almost the whole, like, oh, it was all just a dream. This is the play on that of, oh, it's all fake. It's all made up. All these characters are fake, which some people take as a massive slap in the face. There's some people who are like massive slap in the face because the ending is directly taking shot at them, which is almost deserved. Then there's the people who are like, oh, this is actually just disappointing. Like, legit criticism, like, this is disappointing. It makes earlier entries in the series and the ending feel less impactful. What's the easiest way of describing this? So every game in the series, basically at the end of Danganronpa V3, at the end of the series, this final game in the series, it basically says, hey, not only in this game, but in every previous game prior to this, it's all fake and made up. All the characters in game are actors that we wipe clean their memories and their previous lives, and we just set it up so that that's basically how it is. It's way harder to explain, but I'm trying to explain it to someone who's never seen this Danganronpa series and obviously apparently doesn't care to be spoiled. It basically says, hey, none of the characters that you played in the previous games, that's not their real personalities. We just set it up because we just wanted to tell an interesting story. It comments on the whole, like, people's fascination with reality television. It's all that kind of like gobbledygook nonsense that some people may roll their eyes on, like, oh, it's trying to be all meta and say something interesting. Me, I eat this shit up. I know this is like the type of thing, like, I was talking with someone else even just a week ago or something about the game and the ending, because they had just recently finished it, and they were like, came from the valid criticism part, not the annoying person where like, oh, I feel disrespected. Like, that's too much. But they were like, it makes a lot of the interesting previous parts of the games, like, mean less, which I kind of understand. But in my opinion, again, type of person that eats this kind of shit up, I think of it as like a very super smart way of kind of exiting the series, kind of putting into and portraying and voicing like your pressure you felt making this series once it started getting popular, and then started getting popular in the West, and then it like how do you end a series like that? Like, it's maybe doing like a pulling off like a meta ending like that is maybe the easier route, but I don't think it's less valid. And it's like, how do you? It's kind of ironic because by doing an ending like this, you probably potentially try to pull off an ending that everyone understands, but that doesn't please everyone. Because if you wanted to end the series just in a normal way, in a normal narrative sense, you're going to have a faction of people that enjoy it. You're going to have a faction of people that are like, I don't like that ending. And this one was like, well, we're not going to give you like a good ending or bad ending. Like, I'm really boiling this down, but imagine like I'm going to have a happy ending or a negative ending. If you made one of those routes, there's going to be the faction of people that like it. There's going to be a faction of people that don't like it. If I make a meta, like it all doesn't matter ending, then your hopes, the creator's hopes are probably like, hey, do you at least understand the ending? Do you at least understand where we're coming from? And do you understand that we're like done with the series and done with this plot and done with these characters? Like, and again, I'm saying it ironically, they probably got a lot of people like, this is a worthless ending. And that was probably not their intention. This was probably like their best attempt at trying to end the game and series in a way that everyone could like come to the table and be like, hey, this is, I mean, my thing is like, you should have understood that this game, if it was to end, that it had to end in some wonky way, you know? And it's like, sure, they could have kept the series going and they could have just kept milking that cow and it would just be the same thing over and over. But this way they explain why it just kept repeating and then had to end in a sense. And like I said, if they really wanted to, if someone really wanted to continue the series, there's a couple ways you could easily do it. There's a couple of smart ways I think you could do it. But yeah, I really liked it. And fuck, yeah, like I said, I don't think the valid criticisms are unwarranted. I just know that I'm highly susceptible to eating like meta shit up in video games, especially when it comes to like, I mean, fuck, Nomura and Kingdom Hearts, Nomura, or you know, whoever's directing Final Fantasy, and you know, obviously that gets handed around and stuff. But like, maybe I'm just more easily satiated by wonky Japanese narrative storytelling or something, and maybe I'm just way too easily pleased by stuff like that. I don't fucking know. But the way it ended, I loved. I honestly loved Danganronpa V3. And to me, in my opinion, it was a great way of ending the series. It will be in one of those handful of games that like I'll always now hold as like, man, I wish I could replay this game for the first time and like wipe my memory and replay the series. It's honestly, playing the series is weird to me because like I played the first game like years and years and years ago, then took a long break, got to 2, and then took a longish break and got to V3. So if I was like, if you wipe my memory and then I could like replay the games, I'd probably do them a lot more rapidly. But yeah, I really like Danganronpa V3. Again, I continue to say I think the games would be a lot more popular, like widespread popular, if it wasn't a visual novel somehow, if that makes any sense. I think narratively they're well written, they're interesting, they're quirky intentionally. Obviously, I think it's an interesting. I'm always, when I think back to it, I'm like, oh, it's so interesting to have like a game that's all about like, hey, trying to murder and then getting away with that murder. Like plot wise, I think is interesting. Something I didn't touch about, like the music in this one, in this entry specifically, is really good. They do a lot of remixes to some of the older songs in the games that are really well done. The Debate Scrum song from this game is so good. Certified bop for sure. But yeah, this game is hard to talk about and say all the positives just because it's the ending of a series with games previous to it. But it's super fun. Some weird late game things. If I have any criticisms to it, there's like some weird wonky like late game mechanics that are just like, why is this even in here? It's like a thing. Like, what is the point to this? You're like, what was even the why? Why? I will say initially I liked previous games characters more. This was something I was saying during the playthrough, but like it definitely felt like this game more than the others that I remember. My favorite characters of the bunch died earlier in the game, and I was like, what the hell? Like, and there wasn't. I feel like in the previous games I liked more characters. I don't knock the game too much for this fact, but like I feel like there was more likable or more characters I found interesting in the previous games, and then in this one I've had less, and then they died earlier, and I was like, what the fuck? Maybe that was intentional. I don't know. I mean, it's a taste thing, so can't be like wholly intentional. But yeah, Danganronpa V3, super interesting twists. I love the meta shit, and speaking of meta things, it gets onto our number one game later. But yeah, talk about a year of games that I played that like had a bunch of like weird twists and turns. So yeah, that is number 2, Danganronpa V3. What I consider a well done ending to the series, and then the people who made this game, like they have a game that's like the same concept. So like if you still needed to get your fix on stuff like this, they're still making it. I think there's a game that came out by these people in like Apple Arcade, and then like the rest of it comes out on like the full, more complete experience, like on Switch early next year. I forget exactly what it is, but when you see it, you're like, this is the same fucking idea or game. It's just doesn't have the Danganronpa name attached to it. I don't know. I really liked V3. Super good. Super fun. It was also the first one I played on console and didn't play like on the Vita handheld so that I could stream it. I don't know if me playing on Vita would have changed anything as far as like the way I digested the game. But it was just a different experience playing on console. It was also, one last thing I'll say about it. Definitely the game I had the most fun. Yeah, I'll say it. The game I had the most fun streaming this year, for sure. Not my favorite game this year, but my favorite game I streamed this year, if that makes sense. That experience was fun. So yeah, that doesn't change it on its ranking or anything, but just thought I'd say that. Gotta get on to number 1 here. So if you know anything about me, you could probably guess what I would have ended up picking as number 1 very easily, very handily. My number 1 for the year, game I played this year, is Final Fantasy VII Remake by Square Enix, directed by my boy, my favorite guy, my favorite man in video games, Tetsuya Nomura. I love Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I'm going to say this I said this earlier in this video. I'm going to say this now. I'm going to be gushing about this game. I'm going to ramble. Probably not going to make a lot of sense. And I'm definitely going to hit spoilers. So you've been warned. Final Fantasy VII Remake. I cannot begin to describe, as someone who's long been a fan of Tetsuya Nomura, who's long been a fan of Square Enix as a child, and the games they put out, hugely influential in my life for a lot of reasons, but I cannot begin to count how many ways, once this game came out, how many things, how bad it could have been, just how bad this game could have been. Like the threshold for like what a disaster this game could have been, what a steaming pile of shit it could have been, and then how it just was wildly far surpassed even like my hopeful expectations. They did so well with this game. I'll always go back to I remember it came out when this game finally like officially announced. You know, long has it been teased, long has it been wanted, whatever the case. I always go back. It's always funny to read like I pulled up because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just having some fucking fever dream. But Tetsuya Nomura didn't even, when it was officially announced and he saw his name in the like announcement trailer credit thing, he didn't even know he was going to be working on it. And he was like, I had no fucking idea. And he had to like call someone to confirm that he was actually directing the project. This game, a huge undertaking, and probably one of the many, many, many reasons why it took forever to get a game like this, get a remade Final Fantasy VII game, is that culturally, like, Final Fantasy VII was massive. The importance of that game, and, like, I recently replayed Final Fantasy VII, and, like, it doesn't really age well. Like, I hate saying this about older games because it's not, it's like an easy thing to say and put that kind of label on a lot of games, older games, but like it really doesn't. It doesn't age well. But like if you were there at the time when Final Fantasy VII, like Final Fantasy VII's importance cannot be understated. Just what it brought to like JRPG and how popular it made that kind of video, that kind of game, that kind of genre to the West. It massively blew up, and like it was so important as like to the games industry of like a game. Like I don't want to gush about too much about the old game, but it got that kind of genre massively popular here in the West and was a massively popular game. And I think at the time for good reason. Obviously I have complaints like back then when I played it, and now like I said, age has done it dirty. but I love it for what it is. And so this game remake, so much pressure, and Nomura fucking nails it. This game is so good. I don't even know where to begin. Like, let's put aside nostalgia reasons of why it's good aside. I remember when they announced that like they weren't even going to bring back like the voice actors, like the English voice actors that we all know and love, like from certain entries in the Final Fantasy VII mythos, like fucking Advent Children. Like they'd been using those voice actors and actresses for a long ass time for a lot of different projects, like Dissidia, whenever they had to voice basically Final Fantasy VII characters. And I remember when they announced like, oh, we're gonna bring in new voice talent. And I remember even just the deal that was to people, that like this thing, and you could see from a mile away that like, oh, the pressure for this game is so high, like the bar, like people expect so much out of this game. And Nomura just, he does so good. This is just gonna be minutes and minutes of me just gushing about how much I love Nomura. To go from, oh, I didn't even, like, you put my name on this project and I didn't even know I was going to be doing it, to having to like put this game out with the pressure that it had. They did so well. So putting nostalgia things aside, the actual gameplay of this game is brilliant. So it's like action-y based, but they totally found a smart way to incorporate the turn-based stereotypical JRPG thing to this. Like the fact that like you do little chip damage, but you're basically building up bars, and then you're using those bars to slow down time to choose your actual moves, like your spells and your special moves, to then do more damage and stuff. Like that system works out so well, like gameplay wise. I recently just like I popped in the game to just like replay a little bit of it, just to see if it still felt good, and I was like, yep. Aside from me like completely flubbing certain things because it's been forever since I played, because it's one of those systems where like if you just jump right back into it after a long time not playing, you're just fucking lost. And I think that it shows just how like deep of a system it was, because like I remember when I first played it, there was a little bit of like getting used to, but you quickly learn that's like, oh, it's a really good like system to incorporate like action and like pre-fight planning, if that makes sense. It's a terrible term, pre-fight planning. But yeah, this just the gameplay system so robust. Weapon leveling was such a brilliant, smart way of handling things. Weapons having either different amounts of materia slots to certain abilities and stats and traits and characters. Man, the other thing. Okay, again, we'll get to the nostalgia things point later. Every character, gameplay wise, feeling so different. Like every character playing differently was so important and so cool. And you would go through every chapter, and they very smartly were like, in this chapter, you're going to have access to Barret, Cloud, and Tifa. And then in this next chapter, or this little section of a chapter, you're only going to have Aerith and Tifa. And you had to like not only adapt how you were playing, but also adapt like customization, that fact. But like it expertly spotlighted characters at different points gameplay wise, where you're like, here's a section where you're just Barret, or here, and every character felt so different and so unique, even though everyone could equip materia to have it, just like in the first game where like anyone could wield basically any materia, but the way you would equip it and use it then was like changed up based on who was using it. But everyone's like basic primary fire was all different, and what they excelled at was different in this game. That like I can't get over just how cool it was to get access to a new character and be like, let me figure out how this character is going to feel playing and everything like that. The way they did that should not be downplayed, because it would have been super easy to have like here's Cloud with his giant sword and he smacks enemies, and then you could very easily be like, here's Barret and he just shoots at enemies, and then it could be like, here's Tifa and she just punches enemies, and that all feel somewhat similar. Maybe Barret would still feel a bit ranged. Here's Aerith and you can basically put a bunch of magic on her, but she just smacks enemies. But it's not like that. Like the way Tifa controlled and like the way she chained moves and everything was so smart and felt so good, where if you got super like great at playing as Tifa, the moves you could pull off and the chains and combos you could do was phenomenal. I remember seeing when the game first came out and stuff, seeing videos of people like doing just amazing things with Tifa, just having direct control of Tifa. It was amazing that they put that kind of system, their overarching like action system that basically that you would then have to like go into a menu to choose moves and stuff, could work and branch off and work for all the different characters so well. Like everyone utilized the overall battle system slightly differently, and it all just actually was amazing. Music, some of the redone music, remixes of it, super fucking fantastic still. But I mean, it's Final Fantasy music is always, in my opinion, going to be really great. Story-wise, I have to talk about it being only a part of the original game. Like first off, I want to, again, going back to meta stuff, this game being a game that's fully aware it's a remake of a game, and remake is doing a lot of lifting in that the title intentionally, which is very smart in my opinion. Having a game that knows it's a remake is super interesting, and I think Nomura pulls it off so well here. But there's that trepidation, can't speak, where you're hearing, I remember leading up to the game's release, everyone was like, oh, it's only part of the game, what the fuck is going on, what is this thing gonna be? Obviously we have past examples of Square kind of fumbling everything and making a mess of things, and like I said, it's just so interesting looking back and being like, this could have gone wrong in so many ways, and they just actually pulled it off. Um, yeah, it's ooh, ooh. Let's talk. So yeah, it was only part. It's technically only part, but it pulls it off well. And here we go into slight spoilers and stuff. A game that knows it's a remake, and they use that as part of the plot. It was so brilliant. I think when we started getting, I'm pretty sure they're called like whispers. Those ghost, the fucking dementors from Harry Potter thing. That whole system, what they were and what they meant to the story and the plot. And when you, at some point, I think before they really say it in the game, I think if you're like keen onto certain things, you go, oh, this is what they're doing. This is their intentions. This is what their plot relevance are. But when you learn later on that they are trying to keep like a certain order, and then you start looking outside the game and you're like, oh, they're trying to make sure these ghostly apparitional things are trying to make sure the game happens a certain way, and like the game plays exactly how the original game happened. And you put that all together, and every time you're interfered with by the whisper things, you're like, oh, that was, they were trying to make sure certain things happened a certain way. And you look back at the game, and you're like, oh, and you're like, just me going, oh, a bunch. It's so brilliant. I don't know why I'm nerding out about it, but it's just so good. And then that ends up being like part of like the final boss thing, is like that force of wanting things to stay the same ends up being part of the final boss moments of that whole game, is so good. And the read that the whispers are essentially the old head Final Fantasy VII fans basically being like, this isn't my Final Fantasy VII. Like, you are the whispers. Like, that read, I remember after I'd beaten the game, and I, speaking of how, like, in past other games on this list, like, I beat them years after they came out, so I wasn't part of, like, the discourse or seeing it happen. But I remember when someone pointed out, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's really it. Like, the whispers are, you could, there was two reads that were, like, super interesting to me. There was the whispers are, like, the old fans who are already going to be negative about this game, how they change certain things. Or the whispers are like the old heads at Square Enix, like, and like, okay, the two reads, right? The one that's probably more acceptable, more easily understood, is that the whispers are the old fans being like, this is not how I want the game to be, blah, 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 or, whatever, you're changing something. How dare you change something so sacred? Those are the whispers. And you as the player, Cloud and his team, you, the player, are pushing past those people being like, oh, we're changing Destiny, we're changing it up. Then there's the more slightly different read where maybe still somewhat as valid, where the whispers are like old head executives at Square who are probably demanding of Nomura to make, Final Fantasy VII Remake more like the original game, just look pretty or something. And he and his team are the Cloud and his team and stuff like that. I think is also like an interesting read on it, especially when you start going into like past things with Nomura and Square. This contentious like dynamic between him and Square, where like, I mean, go back to like everything, the disaster that happened between him and Final Fantasy 13 or Final Fantasy Versus 13. And how that was basically taken from him, and like, God, speaking on like Kingdom Hearts 3 from last year, like how much influence that had potentially on Final Fantasy or on Kingdom Hearts 3, and how Final Fantasy Versus 13 was taken and from him and the direction he was going on that. Like, I think it's a very valid read where at some point there was probably direction or something from people above him being like, hey, make Final Fantasy VII Remake a certain way, and he's like, I'm pushing against that and I'm doing my own thing. Like, it's such a super interesting read on the game, and when you look back at it and you're like, oh, this is Nomura doing his thing, and He's probably very often told that he shouldn't be doing certain stuff a certain way or telling a story a certain way, and he's got his own weird way of telling stories. And yeah, speaking on like the ending especially, not only is it like massively fan servicey with the introduction of Zach, but the which is going to be massively interesting later on, I guess, with future installments if we ever see those. But that ending is super interesting and makes me infinitely more times interested in future installments in this whenever we get those. If this game followed the whole Final Fantasy VII blueprints by the book, and then we just got installments every 2 years or whatever, I would still, of course, play them. I would still somewhat be looking forward to them, but it'd be much more of a ho-hum experience. Like, now we've opened it up. Nomura's opened it up and been like, Nomura's like, hey, we could change anything. Now this allows us to do whatever we want. Like, we're going to have similar characters, obviously. We're going to have certain locations. We're going to have similar locations. Not certain locations, but similar locations. But we are changing this up. Like, this is going to be different. We're intentionally making this different. We're going to play on the fact that assuming we know that you played the original game. Like, there is a small part of me that if you didn't play the original game, this game wouldn't have the same impact. I definitely understand that. But this is, like I said earlier, a remake that knows that it's a remake and is for those people that played the original game. And was banking on the fact that hopefully you were open to the idea of getting something different. And the fact that they are changing something, like things, certain big things, and potentially will change more big things later on. Like, ooh, buddy, if you don't think Nomura is going to want to change a certain thing from happening, oh, buddy, ooh, put your money down. Fucking Nomura having a chance to really change a certain thing that happens later on in the game that I won't necessarily technically spoil because it's potentially something that might happen later on in the series but happened in the original game. If you don't think Nomura is going to take that opportunity and try to, like, play on that fact, ooh, I saw, I don't think this is spoilery, but I saw there, and I retweeted just earlier today, there was apparently the, so for, like, what's the motion capture? The actress for motion capture for Aerith tweeted out something about how she did over 4 hours today of motion capture with the actor who was doing Sephiroth for Square. And you just go, ooh, Nomura, like, if you don't think Nomura is intentionally going to change certain things or play on the fact that we know certain things are supposed to happen, ooh, like I said, I'm infinitely more excited and willing to wait for future installments. If we had to wait for just a by the books, like Final Fantasy VII Part 2, Part 3, and it was just going to follow the same thing, it'd be, I think, a lot more boring. I think it would be, it would just be like, I just throw my hands up and be like, I feel like I'm obligated to play it, and I still probably would like them. If this game didn't do what it did at the ending and stuff, it probably would not be number one for me. But I think there's potentially, I put it at 1 because of the future potential, which is weird to, like, say. But yeah, characterization wise, this game does fantastic. There's 3 different flavors of characters in this game, basically. You have characters we know and love, your Tifa, your Aerith, your Cloud, your Barrett. Like, those characters have been expanded upon, characterized to death. The whole Final Fantasy VII anthology that we've had before, like, everyone knows these characters front to back. They expand those characters and flesh them out even more and kind of, like, give, like, a breath of fresh air to some of the characters. They rein back Cloud a little bit, which is always the intention because, like, as you know, like, as more and more projects came out with Cloud, it tied up to them. He got moodier and moodier when, like, before he, like, if you just played Final Fantasy VII Remake, and just that, and we didn't get any of the expanded lore to him. Like, Cloud is not supposed to be like just a completely emotionless, moody boy. Like, that's not what Cloud is supposed to be. And they kind of changed that, and they kind of reined that back in, which is good. Aerith is great in this. Tifa, fucking great. Barrett, really fucking great. So that's the first flavor. Characters we know and love, and they did excellent job with. Second flavor of character is the ones that we somewhat knew of, but they really fleshed them out and were able to get like certain moments to this game. I think the biggest one to talk about is like Jessie. People love Jessie from this game, and for good reasons. Her characterization, great. I think they did a great job with her. Biggs and Wedge, also really great. Those characters that we barely got glimpses of in the past game, and then we got like so much more, was really well done. And then the third flavor games are characters that we, never got in the original game. My main one I want to bring up is fucking Bike Guy. Roche, I think his name was. Just like random character made up for this game, and then like they do a funny, excellent job with. Like, he especially like is my example here, although there's a bunch of other ones, a handful of other characters that are new to this game in Remake. You have that section with him on the bike, and then he just kind of like, he's goofy as hell, which is great. And then you have the bike section. It's like a boss fight on bikes, which is weird and bizarre. And then he drives off, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a thing where he's going to come back into the next game. Like, this is them just setting like this character up for like the next installment entrance kind of thing. That's what I intentionally did, or I initially thought. And then he comes back a little later as like another fight with it off the bikes, and you're like, oh, this is so smart. They brought him back, and it's this whole narrative thing. And I would be surprised if they just still don't bring him. Like, I'd be surprised if they don't bring him back in the next game, because now you've kind of made him as a character, and he's goofy as hell, and there's always got to be some kind of goofy as hell character, and it's just his arc seems to be kind of funny and stuff, and he's like, he heals you before you fight him because he's like, oh, I want this to be a fair fight, and like he's now like this whole thing. But it was very funny when that was happening, where I was like, oh, this is gonna be just just a character they'll bring back once every installment. Like, they'll have like this through character thing, and then they bring him back so early on back again. You're like, oh, this is actually really nice and funny and interesting. But yeah, like I said, characterization from whether they're a new character to these characters that have been beaten to death as far as like us knowing all about them, and they still felt fresh. They still felt really well. Aerith was great. Tifa was great. Moments in that game are great. The game is not without some faults and stuff. The original game obviously is very open-y world, especially like after the first initial hours or so. This game is very much not that. It's very linear. And I don't mind the linearness of it, but it seems as though they tried to, in an attempt to like give it like faux non-linearness, faux open worldiness. They do the like side objective, side quest like structure thing system every few chapters. So like you'll get a chapter, and it's like, this chapter 9, it's mostly just go and do a couple like side quest things, and if you want to do more, there's a bunch more, but you could just progress the next story but if you really, really wanted to. And that side objective thing, although some of them were actually fun, it was kind of clunky for sure, and not handled extremely well as far as like doing them and marking them off and doing the things. So, but that was like, it seems as though that was their attempt at trying to make it seem like a fake open-y world in a weird way, because then you'd go back down, like you would accept a quest, and it's like, all right, it's quite a distance away. You'll have to like go down this open corridor like section and go to a certain thing and beat a certain enemy, or a certain enemy will pop and you have to kill him or something. Like a weird way of them trying to resolve the fact that they knew that it was very linear of a game. And some people didn't really like it. I still did them all. So I should say I did the Platinum Trophy, and I say that because I played everything this game had. The New Game Plus way it handles New Game Plus is also kind of weird, where it's just like, you have all your stuff, you just replay chapters. And you're like, okay, sure. But I played through the game on hard difficulty by doing that. On hard difficulty, the battle system really shines. It's difficult as hell, but yeah, it really goes in, then it really takes you doing the like planning part. So it's really less action, and do you understand what kind of enemy and their battle tactics before the fight, which is kind of smart. You really have to constantly be changing what you got equipped, changing how you're going to be doing certain challenges and stuff. Some post game like bosses are really fucking difficult. I remember spending so much time on some like post game stuff where it was just like beating my head against a wall, somewhat in a good way though, because it was still super interesting and super fun. It was just very difficult. But I digress. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake, like I said, there are an infinite amount of ways that this game could have been very bad. And Nomura and them somehow dodged all those with only a little bit of small complaints and stuff. I'm really massively looking forward to future installments whenever we get those. Who fucking knows how that's going to be done. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to future games in it, and I think they're only gonna, with some of the things that are revealed in, at the end of the game stuff, you're like, all right, anything's on the table to be changed. They're probably gonna now play off that fact that we know that they know that things can change, like one of those things. They know, we know, they know, we know, I know, kind of things. And hopefully we don't have to wait years and years and years for the next installment. Or hopefully this doesn't go, I'm really hoping this doesn't go beyond like 2 more installments. If this goes to 4 or more, I'm going to be like, this is too much. Nomura, you're doing too much. But yeah, super, super, super like this game. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I feel like I said a lot, talked a lot. Probably the game I talked about the most, probably deservingly so if it's number 1. To basically wrap that up, the famous quote, Nomura is very quiet but very powerful. I love Nomura as a creator, as a visionary, as an auteur, and massively looking forward to it. I hope some things they maybe learned from Final Fantasy VII Remake gleams and comes and rubs off of what lacks in Kingdom Hearts, honestly, as a series. I hope they take, not that I want it to exactly be the same thing, obviously that's not what I want, but that they take like the good aspects of Remake and maybe things they've learned as far as like system wise or stuff, and kind of get Kingdom Hearts slightly better. Because I'm not gonna go off Kingdom Hearts 3, but yeah, very much liked Remake, and very much looking forward to the rest of it. Hopefully in the year of 2030, I'll be like, finally glad they wrapped up this series, and we'll look back on it. I'll look back at 10 years ago to this day, where I'm talking about how much I loved Remake. So there it is. The super rambly top 10 games list of 2020 that I made. I apologize. I tried so hard not to be super rambly and try to articulate well. I tried really fucking hard, and I failed probably. But yeah, sorry about that. I tried very hard to make sense, but we'll see when I'm editing this, we'll see how well I actually did on that front. But yeah, this year was bizarre and strange and rough for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, and for me. As cliche as it sounds, playing some games and trying to have fun that way and streaming a lot more of these games and stuff was somewhat therapeutic for a lot of different reasons. I mean, like I said, this year was rough for a lot of different reasons and stuff. And however fleeting the game experiences were, I'm so glad I was able to have some of them. Because, yeah, this year could have been a lot suckier. It was still sucky. Let's not downplay just how sucky this year was. And I mean, the pessimistic side of me says it's not going to be much different next year, but here's hoping. But yeah, like I said, therapeutic and everything, in the sense that like it's been weird year. I've been mostly inside my apartment, especially now switching to working from home permanently. And yeah, not seeing people. I haven't seen like my family in like 2 years now, which is crazy to say and think about. Just goddamn, dude. Yeah. Video games 2020, exciting times, woohoo. Hopefully, if you actually did watch this, surprising if you watched this whole fucking thing, like I said, this might end up being like 2 hours now. That's my rough guess. I haven't looked at the official timestamps of all the recording and everything, but that's honestly my guess now. Just 2 hours of me talking into a mic with an insufferable voice and not really making a lot of heads and tails. I mean, not making a lot of sense probably, but I try. Like I said, I put together these lists because, like I said, the chronicling of things interests me, and my like thoughts and opinions and ideas I have at certain points. It's always, if I can ever stand to listen to my own voice, it's interesting to look back and listen to. And just getting thoughts out in a recorded manner, whether it's writing or voice recording or something, always interests me. So yeah, video games of 2020. Looking forward to 2021. Who fucking knows? I think 2021 is where we're going to see a lot of slowdown just because of the switch because of the pandemic and everything this year. I think we're really going to see it. Like this year we had a couple weird like delays and stuff and things announced delays. I think this year is where we're going to see the effect of that, where a bunch of even like unannounced projects and stuff are probably going to stay unannounced because of the slowdown due to working conditions and everything that happened. So like it's going to be a lot of delays, that like internal delay things that we're probably never going to have actually heard about until they actually get announced, and maybe it comes out like, hey, this was a game that was probably going to be worked on a lot more, this past year and this year, and was probably going to maybe supposed to be released late 2021, and because of this it's going to be like mid 2022 or something like that. Who knows? If I ever get around to playing Cyberpunk and it, games wise, like Cyberpunk, maybe I play it once it's not a buggy mess and doesn't suck shit, and maybe I'll appreciate liking it. Maybe I'll like it. Maybe I'll hit the list. Hades, like I said earlier, maybe I get around to actually playing Hades and I'll probably like it and it'll hit for the top 10 list here for next year, assuming I'm alive in a year's time. Who knows? Didn't silence my phone. I don't know why I unsilenced my phone. I had during all these parts, I silenced the phone so that a beep would not interrupt anything. And then for some reason, I took a break from recording, talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake for half an hour. And then I turned the ringer back on. I don't care enough to re-record this. But yeah, if you watched all this, now I'm getting a call. Fuck off. You know what it is? It's probably Progressive saying my renewal payment is due. God, they're annoying. Oh, God. I just need to pay it. It's not like it's past due or anything. It's like a few days from being past, like a few days, like I need to renew it. Does that make sense? And if you don't renew it, like within a week, they'll call you like every day. Fun. Let me silence the phone just in case. I don't think I'm going to be talking much longer. Yeah. If you listen to this all, sorry that I don't have a better voice. Sorry that I didn't make a lot of sense some of the times. And if you did watch this all, I don't know why, because I'm just an idiot over here with just usually bad opinions on stuff, especially video games in this case. But if you did, that's probably like 2 hours you'll never get back. But yeah, here's to 2021. Here's to hopefully a slightly better year. Who knows? Like I said, pessimistic side of me is not too hopeful, but you know, there's this small part of me that's, you know, looking forward to the next year. But it's also the part where it's like years are mean nothing. It just needs to get better. So here's that. But here's hoping games are fun, continue to be fun into 2021. There you go. There's a rhyme to end the video. Continue to be fun in 2021. And yeah, other than that, thanks so much for listening. As always, like I said, I'll either put the series links or the first part to all the games in the what are they called? How does YouTube work? The video description. That's the word I'm looking for. Down there if you care to listen or watch to any of that. And yeah, streams. You can follow the streams. That's on Twitch. Yeah. I'll probably be continuing to stream a lot more, or as much as I have this past year into 2021. Because it's like, it's my form of shitty therapy, it seems. And yeah, until then, I don't know. Enjoy life. Stay safe. Have fun. I still don't know how to end videos. I still don't know how to end anything. You would think after a while I'd learn, but nope.